Good evening, classmates. This is my final project on the history of the developing world. My name is Susan A. Schott. This is spring of 2017, History 250. My project is on Palestine, and it is Friday, March 10th, 2017. This here is the index consisting of what I will be discussing throughout the presentation by slide. In 1878, the first Zionist colony is established in Palestine. During the 1880s, despite the back and forth between the Ottoman government and Europe in an effort to not cause a problem, the Ottoman government agreed to allow Jews to seek refuge and settle in Palestine as long as they didn't in large numbers. From the early 1890s to the start of World War I, the Ottoman government slowly gave into all the pressures to let the Zionist colonies form and in turn became a German ally. By the end of 1917, the Ottoman government has given up power over Palestine. In 1919, Palestine rejects the Balfour Declaration, which proposed an establishment of a Jewish nation with the help of the British and wanted its independence from both Ottoman and British rule. From 1922 to 1930, control of Palestine is given to the British without their consent, and the Zionists forced their colonization of Palestine, taking over their government, leaving them with very little governmental involvement. With this, major militant clashing begins until the proposal of Malcolm MacDonald that would allow independence for Palestine contingent upon them letting about 75,000 Jews settle in Palestine during a 10-year period. World War II begins shortly after this proposal. Millions of Jews become murdered, causing an illegal mass Zionist immigration into Palestine. With those series of unfortunate events, during World War II, Palestine gaining any independence had become a lost cause. By 1948, the independence of Palestine indeed became a lost cause after being turned against by their own. Palestine and the Cold War. The Soviet Union severed ties with Israel and its cause during the Cold War because of Israel's relationship and reliance on the United States. In the 1950s, the Soviet Union sided with the Palestinians, offering support in whatever area they could, from weapons to financial aid. The Soviet Union aimed to support Palestine in whatever way they would be against Western influence and presence. The conflict between Palestine and Israel had a major impact on the Cold War. The Soviet Union's policies from the 1950s to the 1970s were greatly influenced by its decision to side with the Palestinians in an effort to go against the United States. This also caused the United States to form a close relationship with Israel, making the United States its primary source in aiding the illegal occupation of Palestine. Imperialism and Palestine. Palestine has been a victim of imperialism from the late 1800s to present-day 2017, starting with the British Mandate and leading to the still current illegal Israeli Zionist occupation of its land. The Palestinian people have suffered decade after decade of armed forced imperialism. Since 1949, Israel has received a whopping total of $133.132 billion in aid from the United States, $49.937 billion of which are our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. Despite their occupation being illegal under international law and repeated addressing by the UN to remove itself from the Palestinian territory, Israel continues to take from the United States while the United States continues to give generously. The most negative impacts of Israeli imperialism are the mass killings of Palestinian civilians through excessive use of force and otherwise, thousands of Palestinians, including children, being detained and tortured simply because they are against the occupation, the continued spreading of illegal settlements through the land by tearing down Palestinian homes to build their own, and last but not least, the military blockade of the Gaza Strip, preventing any or very little assistance to the Palestinians. The involvement of the United States in Palestine. According to a number of sources, the United States has been the most involved in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Although a great deal of the United States' involvement has been negotiation for peace and various resolutions, the United States seems to be part of the problem rather than the solution for the Palestinians. Since 1949, the United States has been funding the Israeli imperialism year after year. In more recent events, former President Obama gave Israel a military funding deal for the coming decade of $38 billion. That will be $3.8 billion on a yearly basis. All the while, Palestine has received $0 in military aid and very little economic aid indirectly through the UN to provide things like food, shelter, and access to clean water. Israel thus far has been given the largest amount of aid by the United States in comparison to other countries around the world. Consequently, through our generous help, Israel has managed to acquire the title of being one of the world's largest arms dealers. Interestingly enough, the Palestinian Authority does receive some aid from the United States in order to police their own people and for security purposes. However, this aid only makes things easier for Israel, giving them less things to spend their own money on, in turn actually helping the illegal occupation of Palestine. The UN and Palestine. The creation of the State of Israel was in 1948. Israel, becoming an actual member of the UN, came with the conditions of Resolution 194, which was supposed to give the refugees who had fled Palestine upon invasion the rights to return to their homes and receive reimbursement for all they had lost. After the creation of Israel, it gained stability rather rapidly, of course, thanks to the aid of the United States, causing the UN to be excluded from major issues and decision-making. Tragically, the UN has been kept on the sidelines, witnessing one fail after another in negotiations and peace talks. From 1948 to present day, there have been many resolutions and attempts at both peace between Palestine and Israel and ending the illegal occupation of Palestine. But for some mystical reason, nothing seems to be working. November 29, 2012. After Resolution 6719, Palestine became a non-member observer state of the UN. A non-member observer state is basically a pass given to a guest. Being a non-member observer state is equivalent to how the man feels during his own wedding in some traditions. The man is a major part of the union, whether he is paying for it or not, but everything revolves around the bride. The man can observe and celebrate various aspects of the wedding, but ultimately it's all about the bride's happiness. The status of Palestine in the UN is compared to that of a groom. Palestine has been invited to come and observe various happenings at the UN, however, with limitations. After generations of conflict, bloodshed, infringement of human rights, and last but not least, the illegal occupation of their land, the furthest in progress made has been allowing Palestine to observe what will and will not be done to their own land and people. Not an invitation to contribute, but a mere guest pass to watch from the sidelines. Globalization and modernization in Palestine. The impact of globalization and modernization on Palestine has not been as significant as it should be since 1948. There are two major factors that contribute to the stifling of Palestine's economic development within itself and globally. The two major factors that have been stinting Palestine's advancement in the world are being illegally occupied and colonized, and lack of sufficient funds to do anything more than sustain mere survival. Being illegally occupied has posed a struggle in the face of this rapidly changing and advancing world for Palestine. They surely cannot advance in anything under enforced restrictions, from agricultural goods to equal opportunity, educational systems, and the building of an apartheid wall, if the lack of sufficient funds and means to acquire sufficient funds are under the control of their occupiers. During 1994 to 2001, donations from the international community totaled $5.162 billion in attempts to help rebuild and establish some kind of progress. However, after being divvied up and allocated among priorities such as human resources, agricultural development, water and sanitation, and last but not least, education, out of a totaling approximately 96% of aid received, only 4% was left to deal with if all went well. Boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. In 2005, a movement fighting for the freedom of Palestine, also known as the BDS, was initiated. The movement calls for boycotts of goods and services from Israel, divestments, calling on major structures such as banks, churches, and universities to halt or pull out investments they have made in Israeli companies, sanctions to get various governments involved in holding Israel accountable for its war crimes and constant blatant disregard for the international law. The founder of the BDS movement is Omar Barghouti. The BDS movement has succeeded in gaining major global attention and support for its cause. Although few successes have been made in the divestment and sanction area, there is much success in the boycotting area, and it only continues to grow. Some major results of the BDS movement are the closing of a popular company by the name of SodaStream built on illegally occupied land in 2014, Kuwait boycotting 50 companies linked to building settlements on illegally occupied land in 2014, the globally famous scientist Stephen Hawking boycotts then Israeli president's conference in 2013, the pulling of the orange from the Israeli market, and last but not least, the endorsement and support of various public figures and celebrities like celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain and singer Stevie Wonder. Palestine in 2017. The biggest challenges Palestine faces in 2017 are the tug-of-war struggle over the long-proposed two-state solution, the complete end of the occupation and withdrawal from Palestine, and the one-state solution. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's proposal of the one-state solution and its effect on the social, political, and economic future of Palestine. Upon the permanent discarding of the two-state solution option globally, the current United States administration under President Trump's assistant and the approval of Palestinian Authority and Palestinian people, the one-state solution could possibly be considered. Socially, the implementation of this proposal would mean total surrender of all the Palestinian people, Jews and non-Jews, Muslims and non-Muslims, Christian and non-Christians. Everyone would possibly be getting Israeli citizenship and possibly, after negotiation, equal rights and opportunities for all. Politically, the one-state proposal would mean once Israel gains sovereignty over all the land, all the records of their decades of illegal occupation, decades of infringement upon human rights, decades of war crimes committed, and decades of outright heedlessness of international law will become a thing of the past, leaving Israel to get off scot-free. Economically, the one-state option would greatly benefit all. With equal rights and opportunities for all, it will allow for more economic growth and development, regardless of the number of positive outcomes or how positive they may be. Persuading a people who have been wronged for so long and continue to fight for so long against injustice to agree to simply let go and let live will be a challenge in itself. In conclusion, say, O Allah, owner of sovereignty, you give sovereignty to whom you will, and you take sovereignty away from whom you will. You honor whom you will, and you humble whom you will. In your hand is all good. Indeed, you are over all things competent. Chapter 3, verse 26 of the Quran. Through careful thought and observation, I have come to the development that is neither pro-Palestine nor pro-Israel, but pro-Islam. Throughout my upbringing and experience with constantly hearing debates about the Palestinian and Israeli conflict from both the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, the religious aspect of the conflict has always been vaguely talked about. I chose Palestine for my project because I'm a Muslim and a Palestinian, and have always wanted to seek the Islamic wisdom behind this conflict. The many practical resolutions that have seemed to slip away from the Palestinians and the continued growth of Israel has always left me puzzled. Until now. As a Muslim, I believe in the seen and unseen and must trust in the will of God. If something is meant for you from God, it will be yours ultimately, even if it takes 1,000 years. However, constant fighting and mistrust in the divine plan for all of us only makes us fail test after test and prolongs possible destiny. The above verse from the Holy Quran is what I feel to be the overlooked lesson that should be learned from the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.